Hey, and welcome back to the Financial Fitness Podcast. My name is Jason Edwards. This is my beautiful wife, Sarah Edwards.
Glad to be here with you.
And she did not pay me to say that about her. I actually do think she's beautiful.
Aw.
Okay. Also, we have someone else here. This is getting awkward for
Keep
the
it
other
moving,
guy
people.
on
Keep
the
it
set,
moving.
which is Pastor Ted. Pastor Ted's going to be here today. He's going to help facilitate. You did such a good job on the last podcast that we brought you back.
Hey, man.
And you're super cheap. You haven't charged us yet. I assume we're not getting a bill.
Is in the mail. Like Kevin O'Leary says on Shark Tank, the bill or the invoice is coming.
What if we forward our mail to your address?
Where do we find this guy at, Sarah?
I don't know. I didn't see that in the disclosures.
So, Ted,
Yes.
on the last podcast, we started to talk a little bit about discipline.
Mhm.
And I kind of gave a little bit of a plug. And today we're going to dive into discipline feet first, head first.
Yep.
Whichever way first. That's the way we're going, right? So we're going to talk about budgeting today.
Mhm.
So I'm curious. You usually ask us questions,
Mhm.
but we're going to ask you a question to start with.
Oh, boy.
How's the budgeting conversation in your house? Is this a fun conversation?
So Tiff and I have been married 20 years.
So
and,
no. Got it.
There you go.
Just
Next.
kidding.
It's a good conversation to have. My wife isn't a spender, thank the Lord, for the most part. I'm the guy that spends on toys, tools, and so forth. But budgeting is important.
Yeah.
And so I'm old-fashioned. When I first started, I did paper and pen, and now I use an app that I really like. But it's an important tool. Some of my colleagues laugh at me because I have $50 a week to spend on groceries when I'm on this side of the bridge, and I usually stick to it. And the additional funds that are left over from my 50, believe it or not, Sarah, you'd be proud, they go into my investment vehicle, whether it's $7 or $10, or if I overspend, then the next week I have to take it from that. So I try to stay within it. But the conversation does happen in our house. It happens often, and believe it or not, I have it with my kids quite often.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's not lost on me, and we will talk about this offset, but I do want to learn how you're eating for $50 a week at the grocery store. So
I can teach you, bro.
I feel like there's a lot of ramen noodles in my future, but we can talk about that another day, right? So why don't we do this? Why don't you just walk us through? I think you got some questions for us when it comes to budgets, and luckily, the brains of the operations here with us, Sarah,
Thank
so she's
the
going to
Lord,
walk us
Sarah.
through it because she leads the budgeting conversations in our house.
Sure.
And it can be painful at times, but it's always productive.
It is.
There's nothing wrong with the pie chart.
Nope. Well, if there was a real pie that you could eat, yes, it'd be better.
Not for
But that
$50.
costs
You
money.
ain't getting no pies and groceries for $50. All right, so Ted, we're
right.
going to pass it over to you.
All right. So a couple of questions here. We've got 5, and we're going to go through them. Why is having a budget important? And I think before we answer that, could we identify what a budget is? Like the definition of, some people have literally no clue what a budget is. Let me give you an example. You get paid, or let's break it even down simpler. You get an allowance. Your parents give you an allowance, and you just go willy-nilly. Hey, just go spend. They've never heard of the word budget, can't spell budget, or they can, but they don't know what it really means. Could we start there first? What is a budget?
I think a budget is your roadmap.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. If you are trying to get to a destination,
Okay.
I'm thinking a little bit like Oregon Trail. Maybe I'm old and I don't know who our audience is today and if they used to play Oregon Trail.
I didn't get very far.
But you're trying to get to a destination, and there are things that you know that are going to happen and things that you don't know that are going to happen. But whether that's a destination to a short-term goal like saving money for a car or saving money for a wedding or your first home, or ultimately the legacy that you want to leave for your family, it's important to know that things will happen as planned and things that will happen that are unplanned. And so the budget is a roadmap that gives you insight to the things that could be planned for. But there's an important part of that budget, which is the things that you can't plan for and being prepared for those things. And that's an important part of the budget. So I look at it as an X-ray of what do you have coming in and what do you have going out, and then making sure that it truly reflects your understanding of your spending.
That's, wow. Jason, anything added? Because I think she said it all, but hey, let's ask you.
She did. A budget for me. A budget is how much I can go to Starbucks and rise up every week. That's usually how that conversation starts and
He
ends.
definitely has a budget.
I believe you too, Sarah. I really do.
I do the Starbucks compound impact for many people to show them just the impact of going to Starbucks once a week. And we know a lot of people go more than once a week.
Not me though. Just kidding. I go all the time. All right. So
All right, let me get down.
Let's get back to that discipline word.
Discipline. There we go. I'm trying to find it right now. So after analyzing what a budget is, why is it important to budget? So in simple terms that I can understand, why is it important to set a budget or to have one? Let's give the easy question to Jason this time. That's easy for you, bro.
yeah, I think so. When we look at a budget, so the first thing is it's important to understand what are we actually doing, right?
Yeah.
So it's that deep dive X-ray into what am I spending, what's going out, and then once we account for what those things are, it's really important. This is the beauty in a budget is it allows us to see it, say, hey, these are the opportunities where maybe we should probably improve those kind of things. And I'm not going to use the word limitation. I'm not saying we set limitations on what we can spend, but we give ourselves parameters in which we want to work so that we can achieve our goals. So when we think about why a budget's important, the budget is the vehicle that we can use to get us towards whatever goal we set financially, right?
It also reveals opportunities.
Ooh, that's good.
So it could be that if you really want those $100 pair of tennis shoes, maybe you
I don't play
skip out
tennis.
of
I have picked up
sneakers, athletic shoes.
Okay.
I'm more like $49.95 type shoes, Reebok.
Well, with
week's worth of
inflation,
groceries,
I
though.
mean, I know.
know.
You have the opportunity to say, well, do I really want the Starbucks or do I really want the shoes? So it can provide that insight so that you can start to redirect to achieve those goals that he's talking about.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think the last piece that I'll add here is that it educates you. I think sometimes we just kind of go and we spend. And when we do this analyzation of like, what are we spending? And then we start to match that up against our budget. It's that truth moment that maybe we don't enjoy.
Truth moment, like that.
But it's necessary.
Sure.
And it's that moment where we say, okay, I'm not playing by the rules that I've set for myself.
I can't tell you how many families we've sat down with and you're busy. You're going to all the sports games, you're dealing with life's circumstances, the curveballs that come, and you get caught up and then you start seeking for convenience. You just start eating out and you stop going to the gym and you stop doing these things. The next thing you know, you wake up 5 years later and you're like, how did I get here? And so when you're disciplined, we'll anchor to that word, you have the opportunity to redirect back to what your focus is.
I like that. Disciplined, anchored, and redirect. When I think about the word budget, just from a simplistic term perspective in my own life, it's me telling my money where it's going to go. And then me looking at, once I tell my money where it's going to go, me actually doing that and see, put my expenses on my spreadsheet or on paper or on my app. And then I know when I get paid, how much I get paid. And then I'm putting that money where it's supposed to go. Like literally, I'm telling it, like Kevin O'Leary on Shark Tank. He's like, when my little green men leave, they like to come back home and they bring something else with them, right? So when I put my money into something, when I put it on my budget, it's supposed to go where it is. When I say $50 a week for groceries, when I'm on the shore, that's what I mean. And so it gives me a tracking system to see if I'm on track to meet my own expectations that I put into the game or into the budget. Just the thought there for me, and I mean, you guys are the pros, but is it when people live without a budget, that must be difficult. Because I love what Sarah said. It is the roadmap. It truly is your roadmap to where you're going. It's your GPS system, and you're the one that's putting the information in. So love that. Second question I have for you, big question. if you don't have a budget, where do you even start? Like, so speak to that consumer, that person out there today. And I want to slow down on this one just a minute. Like, for someone that doesn't know Jesus, at the end of the service, Pastor Mark, we always give an invitation to them to know who Jesus is.
Right.
This is a major part of the podcast, a major point of inflection where we go, if you don't know where to start for a budget, where can you start? And so that's why I want to slow it down some, so that I want people to really, because there are tons of people out there that are listening to this podcast. Sometimes pride can get in the way of this. We don't want people to know our personal situation, that we don't even know how to budget. We've never done it before. Don't know where to look for one. Where would you start?
We have a great resource that we can share, and that's a budget worksheet. It's a good place to start. Some people are like, well, what are the inputs to that? Or they might even fill out a basic worksheet and they put 5 or 10 things on there like cable, gas, but then they forget about the other things. So we like to stress test that when we talk to our clients, and we want to look at what's happening in the bank account each month, what's coming in and what's going out, and what's going on the credit card or credit cards. Where's it all coming and going? And so we recommend looking back 6 months and doing an average of saying, okay, what happened? Are there anomalies that we can take off? But what are those things that are actually occurring on a regular basis? And just start journaling it, documenting it. So that works for some people. Another
Well, you said something that I want to stop
Sure.
and really kind of work through. So it can be overwhelming. Can we acknowledge that? Identify the elephant in the room that, like, if you haven't done a budget before, and you've been avoiding doing one and writing down everything, because it is going to expose probably some of your spending
opportunities.
habits.
Wow,
Right?
expose, man. That's a good word.
But it doesn't have to happen in that instant, because the reality is, if I had to sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and write down everything that we're spending, I would probably miss at least 30 to 40% of it. Just probably half of it would be on Amazon. I didn't even know it was going in and going out, right? And that's not saying one person or another, because I spend a lot on Amazon, right?
I bet you Sarah wouldn't miss it, though.
She would not miss it, right? But when we start thinking about this, the one thing I do tell my clients, and it's so 2 things. Number one is take your time and have this in a place where you see it daily and multiple times a day, and write things down as you experience them, right? Because sometimes it's hard to go back and you look through all your credit card receipts and you got all this and you checks and balances. You're like, okay, and you still miss stuff, right? So write it down. And so when you pay something or when you experience something, write it down in there and start to fill this out. What's interesting is that we can ask a client to bring us tax returns and financial statements from 401ks and all this other stuff. And sometimes that's like, for me, that's overwhelming, because that's a lot of different places to get information. They'll bring it in, it'll be stapled, it'll be in order, everything we're asking for. But if we ask them to fill out a budget tracker, it will be like going to the dentist for them to a degree, right? Because it is a moment where you are exposing yourself to yourself on your habits, and maybe where you're not, some things you're not proud of, where maybe you spend too much at Starbucks and you're like, my gosh, right? Maybe I really need to cut this out. Or maybe I don't need all these other things, or I'm spending a ton of money on clothes or whatever it may be. And there's nothing ever to be ashamed about with this. And this is, so we're kind of, I think you're right. We should stay here for a minute, because there's nothing when you're filling out a budget sheet that you should be ashamed of, because it's not until you set parameters, until you say, these are the limits that I want to work within because I've got specific goals. Don't feel bad. Just put it out there, write it down. That's the thing. Like I had a client recently that they're like, oh gosh, don't look at our budget. And I'm like, I don't care what you spend. Like, I care what your goals are. And I'm here to help you fix whatever we need to do and make some adjustments here. But I don't get, like, you don't have to apologize. This is your money, right? It's our money. The way we spend, it's up to us.
A lot of people think that we're a judgment, and that's not what our role is. Our role is to help empower and educate.
A little judgy. Oh, no, for work. Sorry. I was thinking marriage. Carry on.
That's a different podcast.
Another podcast coming soon.
And join us next week for.
It's really, really simple. It's what's important to you. What do you want to accomplish?
Yeah.
And then we can help you use this information to really understand, are you on track to get there or not? And then if that's really that important, we can help you get there by helping you make decisions around what's the priority. I can't tell you as simple as, well, we want to retire, but we want to pay for our kids to go to college. Well, when we start to look at how much the college costs and all the things, that's a very difficult conversation because parents have pride in being able to send their kids to college.
We do.
But sometimes it might be the difference of you can retire at a reasonable age or you can work until you're 85 to send your kids to college. And so that's a difficult piece to work through, but that's where the information and the conversation comes from.
Yeah.
Something that Jason said that, and I know our time is limited, but you used the word exposed multiple times in your when you were talking. And when I think of exposed, it's funny how when the budget exposes things about ourselves that makes us uncomfortable, makes us hide. But we shouldn't hide from ourselves in the aspect of, okay, this is what the budget has. The budget is only as good as the numbers that you put in,
Yeah.
or as they say, the data that you put in, right? So you've put the data in, and the data speaks back to you. Either you like the data or you don't, and there's no need to run from that. I think the idea of owning that first and going, wow, I had no clue I was spending that. I had no clue that I was at a shortfall.
Yeah.
Which is, you guys will talk about that at some other point, or I didn't know I had a surplus. That's why it feels like I have money left over at the end of the month because I forgot to include maybe something.
Yeah.
And I love when Sarah said, like, put everything in there 6 months, going back 6 months, look at your bank statements and look through those things that that you've spent money on, your housing and all of that, your food, your automobile, all of those things. But we shouldn't run from the exposure of what the budget shows us. We're the only people that see it. It's our personal budget. It's our budget. When we bring a financial advisor in, if you have one, they're your partner. They're designed, I believe, to help. I want to bring a little scripture context in for this. Please. Because when we think about, the scripture calls us to do life together. We look at the 12 apostles, and they did life together. They never did it individually. Like when Jesus called Matthew, he said 3 words to him: follow me, or 2 words. Hello, I'm supposed to be good with math. Follow me.
It's okay. Sarah's here.
Yes, Sarah's here. That's 2 words, right? Follow me. And he did, right? And the other 11 apostles joined in to help foster this unity spirit amongst each other. When one was down, one picked up the other, right? Even after Christ left and he ascended to heaven, the Bible says that they were gathered together in one room on one accord in the same mind. There was a sense of community there. And I do think you can find community in this podcast, in various other communities that Emmanuel offers. But more specifically, we're talking about finances. You don't have to walk this journey alone because there are many people that feel shame and guilt. And that's nothing more than, in some terms, I like to call it, it's really the devil just kind of beating your conscience up with the things that you've done that you aren't proud of. Hey, it's okay. God gives grace. Let's pick ourselves up now, dust ourselves off. Let's get the budget. Let's not be afraid of it because it can't hurt you. It's a tool, which I love how you guys talk about it as it being a tool. So just want to kind of throw that out there to bring scripture context into
that's good. How
the budget does affect us, even from a spiritual perspective. Now, we've got a couple more questions, and we've got limited on time. So this third question is for you, Jason. Is it too late to start? If you've never done a budget before, is it too late to start?
Yeah, unfortunately. I'm kidding. No, absolutely not.
Well, thanks, folks, for joining us today.
And that's how the cookie crumbles. Okay, so no, it's not. It's not. In fact, it's not too late to start. And B, don't expect that even if you're starting later in the game and more mature in the way or been very successful and never really kind of came up short every month and you had to create a budget out of necessity, that doesn't mean you're going to be perfect from day one. We have months where we're just off, and we do our best to budget. Hey, this is what we're going to spend. This is what we expect this to be. But life happens, right? And there are times where big expenses hit us, whether it's desire that we want to do X, Y, and Z, and it just costs a little bit of money, or something happened and we got to put money into something we don't want, like a roof or something like that. Like you don't get to really like experience a roof other than you're dry at night, but it costs a lot of money and it hits your budget, right? So that's the one thing is it's not too late, and you don't make too much money to get out of doing a budget. And this is another point I want to make is that when we've had years where we've set a budget and we've just been terrible at actually like staying within the budget. I felt like at first a little bit, but we've also had years where we'd made a little bit more money than we anticipated, right? And so that we kind of like lived in that little world, and this is us being like kind of exposing a little bit of like our journey with this is like we live in that world where like, well, we kind of blew out our budget in a couple different areas, but we also covered it, right? That's not an excuse, because going back in the conversation we have a lot is being stewards of what's given to us and understanding the money that we make. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to make this
Well, I
point.
was cutting you off, but that's okay.
And I apologize. I need to work on that. So, but it's knowing that you're blessed, we're blessed, and the money that we have coming in is a blessing, and it allows us to have whatever lifestyle we want to live and be able to do whatever we want to do. But that's not our money. It never was. God's giving us that as an opportunity to be a blessing, and we have to be stewards of that. And we can't just live
That's so true.
like rock stars because we can. We have to live within our means, because that money was never for us to just go crazy with. That money was with purpose.
Getting back to our last podcast, we talked about one of the questions that we ask our clients is, were you raised, your experience with money? Well, we didn't have any. So for me, I wanted to be very independent. So when we got together, I was like, we have to save every penny. And we literally, like our priorities, our values were make our money, tithe, save for retirement, and then live on what's left over. And so there were months, especially in the beginning, where we literally did eat ramen and peanut butter and jelly because we prioritized those values. And I think that what happened over time as life got busy and things got distracted, we felt like we had a little more elasticity to not pay attention, but that's not being disciplined. And we've talked about that. And so we do course correct, and we have monthly accountability to each other because we have a commitment to be good stewards of our dollars. And that's something that if you can work towards striving, it actually empowers you so much more with your budget in walking that roadmap.
Wow, I love the authenticity of your story. Actually, I know your story, so I think that's great. I think sometimes people look at people, and our time is really running short. But I want to make this point: people look at people, and they only see what's in front of them. And just a little peek behind your curtain told a ton of people, wow, they weren't always where they're at. Their journey started at X, and they're still on their journey. And if we could all get that in our mindset, like what you see sometimes on social media, what you see on TV, that's A, may not be true, and B, even if it is true, there's a backstory to everything. In Scripture, there's a backstory with finances. In our daily walk with the Lord and our daily operational of our home finances and our personal finances, there's a backstory. Just because a person drives X car doesn't mean that they have X resources, right? And we can get into that another time.
That's a whole podcast in and of itself.
All by itself. But for our next minute and 30 seconds, I got 2 fireball spit questions I want to ask you. One for each of you. First, having a budget, can it be restraining, or is it restraining? And you have about 15 seconds, Jason. Go.
No. Understanding what your limits are, there's freedom in that.
Ooh, love that. Ooh,
that's my answer.
All right, and Sarah, last question for you. What do I need to include in my budget? Now, this is rather lengthy one, but you got 15 seconds.
Your needs, wants, and potentially your wishes.
Wow, look at that.
Okay, well, I'm impressed.
Wow, that is fantastic. So
Did you think you were going to
Man.
get 15-second responses on either of those questions?
I did not.
I didn't
I was
either.
worried that we would go over.
I
but
blacked out for a
mean,
minute on mine, so I don't know. Was it a good answer?
I thought that was great. I mean, Sarah was like precise, and you, Jason, I was more so worried about you, but then you were right there. So we have a few seconds left, and we're going to wrap up. And I want to just thank everyone for their opportunity, their time that they gave to us today to sit, listen, watch the podcast about financial fitness. And Jason, would you close us out?
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, Ted. Thank you so much for joining us on the
Thanks for having me.
on the set here.
Sure.
The set. This is not a set. This is a natural environment with no cameras or lighting or anything.
What's wrong with you, man? You see these lights up here?
Don't listen to him. But thanks so much for joining us. We want to see you again, even though we can't see you. We know you're there. And please take the time, go back. If you didn't listen to the first one, listen to the first one. There's going to be a series, and it's going to be intentional for a purpose as we take you on this journey. But we encourage you to dive in no matter where you are. We talked about it today. No matter where you are in your journey financially, right? Whether you're a savvy veteran and and you make great money and all this, or you've got $2 and you're trying to figure out how to do something with that, right? There's a starting point for every single one of us. Take it to God, pray about it. And if there's one challenge we can leave you with, is the money was never yours. It's not yours today. It's not going to be yours tomorrow. It's our responsibility to be stewards of what God has blessed us with. A budget will allow you to do that. So if there's anything else you take from this, hopefully that's the most important piece that you take. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Financial Fitness Podcast.